let's talk about the story of Jack Ma. This is a guy who was rejected from Harvard 10 times, couldn't even land a job at KFC, but then went on to build a global empire and become the richest man in Asia. But it all came crashing down because of a single speech. This is the rise and the spectacular fall of a business titan.
You know, to really understand Jack Ma's success, you first have to get a handle on his history with failure. Back in his 20s, after being turned down for something like 30 different jobs, he applied for a manager trainee position at the local KFC.
Now get this, it wasn't some super competitive, high-flying role. 24 people applied for the job that day, and out of those 24 people, 23 of them were hired. Yeah, you heard that right. Jack Ma was the only person they said no to. Just think about that for a second. It's an unbelievable setback, but honestly, it was just another Tuesday for him back then. This pattern of failure pretty much defined his early life. But here's the thing. Instead of breaking him, it forged this relentless persistence that would, believe it or not, become his greatest weapon.
The list of rejections is honestly kind of comical. He failed his primary school exams twice, his middle school exams 3 times. He was turned down for over 30 jobs. He even applied to Harvard 10 times. And, you guessed it, rejected every single time. Most people would have just given up, but Jack Ma, he was just getting warmed up.
So in 1995, he's on a trip to the US, and he uses the internet for the very first time. He searches for the word beer and gets nothing from China. And right there, a light bulb goes off. He sees this massive opportunity. He rushes back and starts where almost nobody was even online yet. So how in the world do you sell the internet to people who've never even heard of it? Well, May's solution was pretty clever. He started circulating this powerful quote about how the internet was going to change everything. And he said Bill Gates said it. The only tiny problem? Bill Gates never said that. May just completely made it up, figuring that having a big name like Gates attached would build some much-needed credibility. It's a great little hint of the clever and, yeah, sometimes controversial tactics he'd used to. So, China Pages eventually failed. But for a man who was basically a professional at getting rejected, this was just another lesson learned. In 1999, he gathers 17 of his friends in his tiny apartment and pitches them a brand new idea, an e-commerce platform he was calling Alibaba. And this was the beginning of an absolutely epic showdown. And things moved incredibly fast. Alibaba scored $5 million from Goldman Sachs almost immediately. Then, SoftBank's Masayoshi Son invested $20 million after a pitch that lasted only 5 minutes. Son later said he saw it in Ma's eyes. He felt an animal smell of success. Well, that smell turned his $20 million into $50 billion. By 2003, they launched a new platform called Taobao, and they were ready for their first big fight. Their main rival was eBay, the undisputed king of e-commerce, and they were muscling into China. On paper, this was an impossible fight for Alibaba. But Jack Ma, he framed the battle perfectly with this famous quote. He knew he couldn't beat the shark in the open ocean. He had to drag it into his home turf, his river. And this is where their strategies were just night and day. eBay, the shark, used its clean, standardized global design, and crucially, it charged people to list items. But Ma's crocodile, Taobao, was built by Chinese people for Chinese people. It was busy, it had live chat so you could haggle, and the killer feature? It was completely free to use. This created this massive engine for growth. And it's a huge lesson, right? Global giants often fail because they just can't compete with the local knowledge and trust of a hometown hero. But the real masterstroke, the knockout punch, was Alipay. See, back then, nobody in China trusted online payments. So Ma created an escrow service. Basically, Alipay would hold on to a buyer's money, and it would only release it to the seller after the buyer got their stuff and said they were happy. This one simple idea solved the entire trust problem. And, well, that was the end of eBay in China. With eBay out of the picture, Alibaba's dominance was total. Jack Ma, the guy who couldn't get a job at KFC, was now sitting on top of an e-commerce empire. And what an ecosystem it was. You had Taobao, which was like a giant digital street market for regular people. You had Tmall, where big brands like Apple could sell directly to consumers. And holding it all together was Alipay, which became the go-to payment method for, well, almost everything in China. They didn't just own the store, they owned the bank too. So in 2014, when Alibaba finally went public on the New York Stock Exchange, it was no surprise that it absolutely shattered all the records. The IPO raised a staggering $25 billion, making it the largest in history at the time. And just like that, Jack Ma went from being a national hero in China to a global icon. He was the richest man in Asia, a living symbol of China's new economic might. He had finally reached the summit. But right at that peak, he was about to make a fatal mistake. All right, let's jump to the moment everything changed. It's October 2020. Ma is just days away from launching another record-breaking IPO, this time for his fintech company, Ant Group. And he decides to give a speech. In front of an audience packed with high-ranking government officials, he publicly rips into China's state-run banks and calls the country's financial regulators an old people's club. Now, in a country where you just do not publicly criticize the government, these words were like throwing a match on a pile of gasoline. The payback from the Chinese government was swift, it was severe, and it was designed to send a crystal-clear message. The era of the untouchable tech billionaire in China was officially over. Just 2 days before it was set to launch, regulators pulled the plug on the Ant Group IPO. The value of what would have been the world's biggest IPO, $37 billion, just vanished. Poof, gone overnight. Next, they came for Alibaba itself. The government hit the company with a record-breaking antitrust fine of $2.8 billion for so-called monopolistic conduct. The market reaction was, as you can imagine, brutal. In just 1 year after that speech, Alibaba lost a mind-blowing $344 billion in market value. It was one of the biggest wipeouts of shareholder wealth in history. After the crackdown, Jack Ma, a guy who was once everywhere, just disappeared. He vanished from public view for months. He's since popped up here and there, but he's really a shadow of his former self, forced to give up control of the very empire he built from scratch. So, who is the real Jack Ma? It's fascinating. He once said his biggest inspiration was the character Forrest Gump. When someone asked him why, this is what he said. He always played up this image of being a simple guy, not a tech wizard, which maybe made people underestimate him, which was probably exactly what he wanted. And I think that brings us to the ultimate question. Is Jack Ma's story the ultimate saga of a business genius who literally changed the world? Or is it a cautionary tale